Are we ready out back? You're ready? Okay, great. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kumar,
Here.
Ms. Pachetti,
Here.
Ms. Elder,
Here.
Mayor Gallo,
Here.
Mr. Love,
Here.
Ms. McPherson,
Here.
Mr. Sleesman,
Here.
Mayor Weiss,
Here.
Ms. Wiggum. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Next, we have the approval of the minutes for March 24th, 2026. Do I have a motion and a second for those?
Move to approve, Sleesman.
Second, Love.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. Next, we have a finance overview, and Raj Gotham, our Deputy GM for Finance, I think will take the lead, and he might have some help from those behind him. So welcome, Raj.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Kumar, members of the board, and for those online. My name is Raj Gautam. I'm the Deputy General Manager of Finance and the Chief Financial Officer for the GCRTA. We are here to present an overview, a plan, if you will, that will balance the operating and capital needs of the authority as we navigate through several issues. The idea here is to give the board and management enough time to evaluate additional sources of revenue, to address what is the structural gap in funding that has always existed but got alleviated as a result of the stimulus funds that we had received back in 2020 and 2021. So with that background and reference to COVID and the stimulus funds, let me start with excerpts from a Secretary-Treasurer presentation that I had made back in May 2021. We had talked about using those stimulus funds in a strategic manner that would ensure stability for the authority. We wanted to make sure that we kept our thoughts on the long-term impact, and it was a three-pronged approach that we had taken, that we wanted to make sure that we addressed the needs of the operating budget, address unfunded capital projects, and reduce the outstanding debt. In the same presentation, we had outlined an approach, and mind you, this was back in May 2021, so the actuals did change a little bit as time progressed. But at that time, what we had suggested was that we would support the operating budget in the tune of about $99 million. We would use 156 or so million in unfunded capital projects and about 60 million in debt reduction. As part of the same presentation, what we had talked about as far as the support of the operating budget was, we had projected that we would ensure stability of operations through 2026, that it was going to be a reserve to mitigate economic risks, and we projected at that time that there would be no layoffs or furloughs for staff, no service reductions during that period, and we would reduce our reliance on federal funding for preventive maintenance. PM reimbursements, for those who may not be aware, are grant monies, federal dollars, that we can charge to the grants for labor that we provided that otherwise could have been subcontracted out. Historically, we drew PM, which meant transferring from capital funds to operating funds to support the operations, as high as 15 to 25 million a year. In the last several years, that amount has been roughly 1 to 5 million, and even that was not necessarily a support for the general fund that was needed. It was largely to close out some old outstanding grants. The projects had been finished. There were some grant balances, so we charged our labor to draw those funds down. This is an excerpt from the 2026 budget transmittal letter that the board approved back in December. There were 2 public hearings and 2 presentations in November and December, if you recall. So the structural gap that I keep talking about, et cetera, is the number that I would like to draw your attention to is not so much the 26 budget, but the 2-year plan that we also presented. And if you look at the 2028 plan column, it shows projected ending balance of a negative 48.3 million. And I'm going to talk in round numbers so that I can explain myself a little better. So if one were to assume that 30 million or thereabouts is the operating reserve, the 1 month operating reserve that board policy requires, right there we've got a $78.3 million problem to get back to compliance with the board policy. Since these numbers that are being presented are on a cash basis, the total revenues include transfer from our revenue stabilization fund also. So included in those numbers, the $363.8 million for 2026, $44 million of required transfers from the revenue stabilization fund are included. For 2027, $32.5 million. And zero in 2028 because we essentially run out of that state savings account sometime in late 2027. And we, the board, had instituted a policy back in December which requires that we will not go below a 15-day balance in the Revenue Stabilization Fund. That will remain. We've seen this slide before, but just to recap, you see the orange line represents the balances as of the end of each of those years. So 30 million was transferred in 2024. 45 million was transferred in 2025, which left a balance as of the end of 2025 of roughly 81 million. As stated earlier, 44 million is budgeted to be transferred in 2026, which will leave an estimated ending balance of a little over 40 million. And then the 15-day reserve in the fund that we instituted, we would only be able to transfer 32 million in 2027. And as I stated earlier, that fund would essentially be depleted in 2027. Wanted to present a history of our long-term debt that the authority has carried over the years. You can see that back in 2012, we had roughly 170 million of outstanding debt. That number, if you fast forward to 2025, is currently at 13.9 million, which gives us plenty of capacity to meet the capital needs, et cetera, if we use those funds judiciously. Now, I do want to state, because there have been several discussions and questions over the last several weeks, we have never issued debt to meet any operating needs. We do not issue debt to meet salaries. These are specifically for capital projects. A quick reminder, this debt instrument is tax exempt. So anytime you do anything that is not clearly stated and revealed to the investors, to the rating agencies, IRS documents, Ohio Department of Taxation, we clearly outline in the official statement, or what is also called the bond prospectus, to what purpose these funds are going to be used, which capital projects and what category of capital projects will use these funds. So heavily restricted. You'll see the major decline from 2020 to 21 when it went from 106 million to about 47 million. That was where that debt payoff took place as part of the plan that was outlined in May of 2021. Historically, RTA has always gone out for debt on a very regular basis. In 2014, we went out for about 29.7 million. In 2015, again, we went out for 51.4 million. 2016, a little over 15 million. And the last issuance of debt was in 2019 of 30 million. No debt has been issued since 2019. A lot of data over here, and I apologize for the smallness of the font and the text size, etc. But this really is a summary of a 10-year budgets by each fiscal year from 2016 through 2026 budgets. And as we look at the last two columns on the right-hand side, those amounts represent a change in the amounts and the percent change between 2016 and 2026. Salaries and overtimes have increased over a 10-year period by about 30.2%, effectively an average of 3% increases, which is fairly reasonable in this marketplace. Payroll taxes and fringes, one would assume, would move in proportion to that increase. And payroll taxes certainly do because they're essentially a percentage of the payroll. Included in the fringes is the healthcare that has steadily grown over the years, so that number is why it is closer to 70%. All the other expense categories, except for services, materials, and supplies, and paratransit, purchase transportation, have actually been lower from 10 years ago, which I think is remarkable considering the time frame that we've been operating in with higher inflation, et cetera, and just general cost of living increases from year to year. It is remarkable to see fuel, utilities, inventory, et cetera, being down from 10 years ago. As part of the budget process that started in August, September 2025, we started recommending to the management a certain cost-cutting, cost-saving kind of an approach. In the budget book, we suspended the transfer to the rolling stock reserve fund for 26 and 27. We had previously planned for $5 million each year. We suspended the merit increase that resulted in $1.2 million in savings, reduction in non-personnel costs, $2.5 million. I'm not going to read each and every line, but that's clearly out in front of you. All those savings and the impact of which on the 2026 cash flow in the budget was almost $18 million, as you can see. We further recommended for 2026 several other steps to make sure that we continue to provide stability once again through the end of 2028. So there were elimination of certain positions through consolidations to generate more efficiencies, which will result in about $6.2 million in savings over a 3-year period. Reduced transfer from general fund to capital from 10% to 5%. That has been a board policy since 1978, and the exact period escapes my mind, but it's been a long-standing policy that we will transfer 10% of the sales tax to meet the capital needs. And that is a proposal that we have discussed and presented to the Committee of the Whole in early March, and we'll continue discussing that shortly. But that $42.7 million is the largest component of the $68.3 million in cost savings that could be achieved to ensure stability through the end of 2028. You've heard that we have made efforts to recruit more part-time versus full-time operators. That has been implemented. With the assistance and leading of Nick Davidson's team and Flance's team, we were able to renegotiate paratransit third-party contracts that will result in about $6.5 million in savings over the 3-year period. That $1.5 million is the 2026 impact. Service reductions in process we discussed at the earliest committee meeting. That is in process. We are going to suspend transfer to the rolling stock reserve fund, which was initially planned for 2028. That's $5 million in savings. And we are evaluating and will at some point look to implement a 3% convenience fee on credit card activities, and that's in process. I do want to point out that the second line item, which is the largest, the $42.7 million, is a temporary reduction for a 3-year period to ensure that we are stable through the end of 2028. Additional recommendations made to the management have been to begin evaluation of a sales tax levy. We have the authority of issuing up to another 0.5% in Cuyahoga County. So the evaluation centers around whether it's 0.25% or 0.5%, which would approximately generate $70 million if for the 0.25% or $140 million if you go for the 0.5%. Once again, these are approximate numbers, and that currently is in process. We've talked about issuing debt to mitigate the reduced transfers from 10% to 5%, and we will be bringing that for consideration and board approval in May. Management will continue looking for efficiencies through consolidations, et cetera. That is an ongoing process. We were charged with minimizing service reductions to the extent possible so that we don't negatively impact our clients, our customers, et cetera, and that remains in process. And I'll just remind the board and those listening, the initial recommendations back in December 2025 were pretty large and pretty significant, and we were nearing 10 million in annual savings or 12% cut. We were able to avoid that through some other cost savings that we had looked into. The last item on the slide is obviously to consider increase in fares. That will be decided and discussed and brought to you if some changes are recommended. So questions have come up as to what impact the reduction from 10% to 5% would have on the capital program. So I just wanted to kind of, and once again, these amounts are rounded for easier math so I can explain things in simpler term. But essentially, if you factor that the sales tax is roughly 280 million by board policy, we're required to transfer 28 million to the capital program. So that's what the first column indicates. It's a 2026 budget. We would have transferred 28 million approximately to meet the needs of the capital projects to come up with a 20% local match. Okay? With the recommendation of reducing that amount temporarily for the next 3 years to essentially by 50%, you see in 26, 27, and 28, that amount will go down to 14 million for each one of those years. And how do we want to make up for the loss of the 14 million for the capital program so it doesn't get negatively impacted? That's where the issuance of debt comes in at 35 million, and that's you see how it is being allocated. It may not necessarily be an exact ratio that's demonstrated. It will be based on what capital projects are coming up and will meet the need, but just to demonstrate that we will have the funds to mitigate the impact. Obviously, the new debt will have new debt service associated with it, so that is being subtracted out. The timing of the debt is such that we will make only one interest payment in December 2026. That's the 840,000. If you'll all recall, we typically pay interest twice a year on our outstanding debt, June and December, and one principal payment that takes place in December. So the timing of the debt is such that we will only make one interest payment to minimize the cash flow impact. In 2027, we will have two interest payments and a principal payment, and same thing in 2028. So there was a shortfall. We have a separate bank account, a local match fund designated. We will be able to meet the remaining 2.8 million, 4.2 million, 5.8 million in needs so that we make the capital program whole. So we do not expect any negative impact on the capital program. If and when all these recommendations are implemented, the amounts that you see in red is all the recommendations and their impact on the same budget document that we've previously seen. So when you look at other operating revenues of 300,000, that is the convenience fee on the credit cards, et cetera, that we're proposing and evaluating. So all the red numbers are the ones that have changed from the 2026 budget book that we had previously reviewed. All of these recommendations, once implemented, without any impact, or we are definitely not considering any levy proceeds in any of these numbers, but all the other recommendations, once adopted, will ensure that we will end 2028 with almost 27 million, almost close to the 1 month operating reserve that the board has a policy for. So quick reminder, we had previously discussed the code book update at the March 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting, and this was to change the transfer requirements from 10% to 5%. At that time, the Committee of the Whole had approved and forwarded that recommendation to the full board for consideration, so we plan on bringing the resolution to the board for approval on May 19th. The debt issuance will require a more detailed presentation on May 5th, 3rd? What's the coming? 5th. On May 5th, we will be presenting a more detailed overview of the bond issuance process, the timeline, et cetera. And then the resolution is scheduled to be brought forward to the board on May 19th. All of these actions for additional revenue sources and for sales tax levy timing options, these are the timing options, so we are just giving ourselves enough time to meet any of those time frames. The Finance Division was tasked to ensure sustainability for a 3-year period. We believe that we have put together a very strategic plan here that gets us there, which gives us plenty of time to evaluate the timing of sales tax levies and any additional sources of new revenue. Reminder that this has been a long structural operating gap, not just an effort of plugging deficits. We are trying to ensure stability through 2028. We are trying to protect the cleaned up balance sheet through that debt reduction measures that have been taken over the past. We want to definitely protect that and provide ourselves adequate time to evaluate additional revenue sources. And the call to action is we need to do some of these things right now, because if we do not adopt these recommendations and we go back to this little scenario, where we talk about that 48.3 million or a 78.3 million problem, the clock is ticking, and we get ourselves into 2028, it is going to be nearly impossible to cut 78 million in expenses in 1 year without touching employees and significant service reductions. So with that, I'll stop and see what questions there may be that I can hopefully address.
Raj, could you go back to page 12 for a second? And Raj and Kay and I spent some time going over this presentation and information I wanted, information I thought each of you would want for consideration. And I did request them to push this back for a potential vote into May because I want to make sure each and every one of you has time to digest all of this. I'll share with you my notes I gave to Raj, and I'm going to want to follow up with each of you after the meeting just to make sure this is a lot to take in. So I want to make sure we have all your questions answered and want to do that in the next week or so. So we've got some time to work through this. My question, Raj, and we talked about this. So like in service reductions here in process, we have $6 million. And if you go to page 15 and 16, Kay had done some quick, or go back to 15, please. Oh, or 16, sorry, you're good. You can see those service reductions we talked about. I think we sort of did the back of the napkin math. It was 900,000. I think for this, you probably rounded it to $1 million to make it easier to read, which is fine. That's totally fine. But I was asking them in the financial projections if they could sort of list what assumptions are, because, you know, in the one slide, that's $6 million over time. We knew this year we were only going to phase in 900,000.
Correct.
So by each of those years of what those assumptions were, I think to make sure we're hitting those marks, if you're voting on sort of a projected budget, they have some of that detail listed and to get back to us. I know we met last Wednesday or Thursday, and with
it's been a blur.
your
But yeah,
management
one of those
retreat,
2
things
days.
like that. It's sort of a work in process, but that's the type of thing to look at that to make sure you understand that phasing. Is that realistic? And you know, that's just one idea where you're not getting the whole $6 million in 2026, but what are those other assumptions in service reductions in 27 and 28? What does that $2.5 million mean in service reductions, you know? So that's some extra work we'll be working on, but again, I want to touch base with all of you on that. Other questions?
We probably need to sit down as well. I've got a bunch of questions.
Happy to do it
But let me
anytime.
just start with initially, to Mayor Kumar's point, I appreciate that. Where we are planning over multiple years, it's really challenging to see the impact of that without seeing, going out maybe even 5 years to see what it looks like as those dollars come in. So is it 6 million over 3 years, or is it something else? But I guess the fundamental question, the linchpin, I think, if I'm not mistaken here, is that we're issuing how much in debt?
35 million.
35 million. And that assumes, if I think I'm correct, that assumes no additional revenues from a levy.
We have, in these presentations and these projections that have been outlined, no proceeds from the levy have been incorporated. It is largely a result of cost reductions.
Okay.
And the small minor 300,000 in credit card fees that we are projecting, that we are reviewing.
Okay. Does the agency have a position or a thought on, if the levy were to pass, what would the impact of that be with respect to all the pieces, parts that are moving around? And I recognize there's a lot there, but I just wanted, and you don't have to answer to right now, but it would be helpful to know, I think, for the board to understand that if that were to happen, where do those dollars go and what gets unwound? Is it that 10% to 5 will go back to 10? So.
Yeah, and I brought this slide back for specifics. If I had a crystal ball as to when the levy would be pursued and when it comes through successfully, yeah, I can offer greater thoughts. But once again, we were tasked with making sure that at least we give ourselves 3 years through the end of 2028, as stable as we possibly can, minimize service reductions, as little damage, if you will, to whatever sources. And this is that strategic plan that we're outlining here today. This gives us several time as better information on the levy timing and the amount, whether it's 0.25% or half. We will have projections in fairly short order that will address most of your questions.
And again, part of that and some of these financial projections below of just listing what Raj and Kay have done a great job of providing that detail to me, but just listing some of those assumptions. What does that mean by year as you go through it, I think is really helpful, because then you can reflect by looking those into the financial statements and tie the two together.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the overview, and again, probably have some follow-on questions, and look forward to connecting with President Kumar. I guess my question is maybe stepping back further. We talk about the potential of a levy, but is there an internal discussion or process ongoing that's also thinking about alternative sources of revenue? I know you mentioned credit card fees, but how are we thinking strategically about alternative revenue sources or additional revenue sources, notwithstanding the levy?
Yep. And I'll repeat myself. Several measures are being reviewed, whether it's sale of land, long-term leases of land, TOD. Although TOD is not going to generate money in 6 months, right? So those are all currently under review. And I'll repeat myself again. What we are trying to do is make sure that we give ourselves this much time to continue reviewing and evaluating and coming up with suggestions that will make sure that the authority benefits for a long term. I don't know if that answered your question.
That's helpful. Look forward to getting more information.
We'll bring it as soon as we have it.
I'll build on Trustee Love's question, and hopefully you don't have to repeat yourself. I think so. And first of all, I'll just say I apologize for missing the March 24th meeting. It sounds like there was a very robust discussion about service reductions, and that's where a lot of my questions are. So just forgive me in advance. I did read the minutes, so hopefully this isn't repetitive. Okay. But Trustee Elder had requested a high-level document with just generally the routes and the cuts. And so my first question is, when would we be seeing that? Because and my questions are related to some of those cuts in service.
Okay. I do recall that question. Some of that information was within the service reduction presentation. One of the last slide or two outlined which specific routes were being impacted, and the savings in revenue miles are, Joel, am I using the term correctly?
Right, yes. The savings were expressed in vehicle revenue hours, which pretty much is proportional to costs. So we can follow up. I think staff should confer after this meeting to ensure that we've met that requirement of communicating to the board the allocation of dollars, price tags on each of the service adjustments.
Yeah, and if I could just add, so yes, that number was included, but I think just from my perspective and anyone in the public who would have read that, it didn't necessarily translate to hard dollars. I believe that you guys included the overall number of dollars that would be saved, but it wasn't broken down for each route in dollars, only the cost per, or the
Right.
per ride hour.
And just for
If I
those-
could, just once, I'm sorry, just to interject. Bob, my recollection, I could be wrong, I just want to make sure, and if so, we can definitely resend it to you. Thank you. I believe that we sent that to the board via our PIO, Bob Fleeg. So sometimes we send out information, so check your emails, and I'm going to ask Bob to resend that. We provided that information to a media outlet and sent it to the board in advance?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So Bob, if you can resend that information, and correct me, it was the breakdown of...
It was a breakdown in each route with a dollar figure to the hours.
Okay, so we'll get that back out to you to flag in your email again.
Great. So I'll bring it full circle, I promise.
Okay.
And just one follow-up on that to make sure that for Joel and teams, $6 million in service reductions in your slides that you show there.
Yep.
Are there additional routes in future years that weren't on that presentation that we saw in March that would be impacted? I think that's part of your question is, we saw that, we quantified that, we understood why those decisions were made by management. Sure. But in that 6 million, are there additional routes that could be affected or adjusted or eliminated or whatever that might be that are included in your financial forecast that aren't part of that slide deck that we saw in March? I think that's right. What I'm hearing.
I think
right?
both Joel and I are dying to answer that question. Joel,
Okay, so this
you're
is
looking at Joel.
For the benefit of anybody listening.
because he kept on doing this.
I can thank you for your question. I got it. So for the benefit of anybody listening online, I'm Joel Freilich, Director of Service Management. My team helps figure out what we do to service when we have a budget need. So let me explain what we are taking to public hearing, and it won't be finalized until we hear from the public and analyze what they have to say. But what we're taking to public hearing, that reduction generates annually $2.5 million worth of savings, which means it helps the 2027 budget by $2.5 million. It helps the 2028 budget by $2.5 million. But the 2026 budget is only helped by $1 million because this service reduction takes place August 16th, when a good deal of the year is behind us. So the derivation of 6 million is 2.5 plus 2.5 makes 5 plus 1 more makes 6. So the fundamental question is, no, this set of financial projections is based on an assumption, which we hope will prove true in reality, that no further service reductions would be put into effect. So if more service reductions were put into effect, then the projections would be different than the ones you're seeing.
And I think...
Thank you, Joel.
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish. Yeah, and I think this is Raj, what you and Kay and I talked about is understanding is that $6 million, obviously it's spread over 3 years. It's not an annual figure for reductions in terms of looking at a budget, but it's spread over those 3 years, 2.5, 2.5, and 1. So just when we're presenting
correct.
stuff that what that $6 million would be is showing maybe over 3 years what that looks like, and that's sort of what that side set of assumptions I think would be helpful for folks to reconcile and not think that there's $6 million in cuts each and every year that are happening. It's a cumulative effect over 3 years.
That is correct. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I think it would, as we look at the different, I ask about the individual service reductions because I think it would be helpful as we look at how much each of those cuts represent. There may be an appetite, I don't know the process for this, but there may be an appetite in the community to step in. And so my question is, have we considered for some of the service cuts that affect maybe certain parts of the community more than others, have we considered asking the city, the corporate community, philanthropic community to help subsidize some of those routes if it is in their interest to do so? This gets to this question around, have we considered sources of revenue and partnerships as we consider some of these cuts? And so I just put that out there, and then I have a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And did you want?
Yeah, I can just kind of address from a really high level. So the idea of being able to talk with folks, and some of this I think, and I'm looking at Natoya when I'm saying some of this is the branding, right? If you talk about service, for example, we've had conversations here and in other forums. CSU is a good example, right? We go through UPass programs as well, and a lot of different organizations are all feeling the crunch, and that's not to say that some folks wouldn't want to sponsor something. We have not had luck in that arena yet, but we have had the reverse with a lot of folks actually or entities pulling back from sources that would fund our revenue, right? So if we're talking about, I'll just use CSUs as the latest example for the rebranding, right? We're reverting back to our RTA branding because they're looking at their financial outlook as well, and that funding could be utilized differently in their coffers. I've had personal conversations, company conversations with group and individuals with downtown Cleveland, for example. A trolley line is on that service reduction list, and we went through that conversation before, and been talking to them for 3 years or so to be able to think about how to get preemptive action to be able to potentially sponsor that line. They have not bitten. We've also talked with the city of Cleveland. They have not bitten on that either. But it's a good question, and we've thought about that early in advance. We've also had a lot of our philanthropic conversations. We've had conversations with the Gund. We've had conversations with Cleveland Foundation, just being able to think through how we can collaborate. Most folks want to collaborate on projects. They do not necessarily want to kind of go back to old hat where they would sponsor a trip, so to speak. They want to think about transformational kind of capital projects that they can kind of buy into, and that's why we're really focusing on the TOD. That's why we're really focusing on those areas that they can be project owners, but we have kind of tapped that well for the service sponsorship, and it's come up dry so far. But it's a good question, and I want to say I appreciate it. It makes us know we're on the right track, but we just haven't gotten that buy-in that we usually have historically. And I will say, I think we found, and the trolley is a great example, maybe 15 or so years back, Kay, you might have the numbers in your brain a little bit more than I do, is a great example of having a line that was intended to have sponsorship, but we end up hosting it over time. And so we have to kind of retool the model on how we get revenue to be a little bit more creative, I think, for projects versus service. Most folks want to fund capital instead of operational.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I agree. I think we just need to keep that possibility open. There's a lot of investments being made in downtown Cleveland right now, a lot of energy. You never know, things change month to month. So hopefully there's openness to new ideas, new innovations around how we fund things.
Really quickly, I'm sorry. I will say to that point, we're having robust conversations with Bedrock and conversations with Tri-C and conversations with a lot of other partners to be able to buy into things like commuter advantage programs, for example, that actually gives us funding in different ways where they're able to increase their ridership through our service and then exposure. So, yep.
Thank you. So that's why I was asking about the line by line, because nobody's going to, say wholesale, yes, we want to help RTA, but if they have a specific interest, they might. And then I just have a comment, and I guess it's just on the framing as I'm seeing some of the information roll out. I hope that we're not just, I think it'll be important in our public meetings, not just to say we're cutting service to get to a certain number. I think it's part of good business to always be reevaluating our routes and making sure that we have more than one customer or 3 customers on a route that we're serving at a given time. And so I think part of this is just financial health and responsible stewardship of public dollars. And I just hope that doesn't get lost in the story about us just trying to get to a number. And I saw that in some of the historical context about how, we made some adjustments to routes. Sometimes we add routes, sometimes we lose routes, all the time. And so this, I think is just a healthy reset of which routes are working, which aren't, especially after COVID. We just have to be mindful that we're still businesses are still adjusting their remote work policies, commuting patterns, where people live and work, all of that. So I just wanted to add that as a comment because I think it's important as we frame this for the public.
Right. No, thank you for those comments. And I think my team members have, over the years, heard me comment that we try to be as proactive as possible, and we largely are. But there have been several instances where we had to be reactive. COVID being a fine example, right? We made investments and incurred costs at that time that no one had known about, whether it was sanitizers and extra cleanings and infrared, whatever those things were called. Moonbeams, thank you. But yeah, so the point is well noted. Thank you.
Raj, going back to the debt for a minute.
Yes, sir.
Again, I don't know what our options are, but for those of us that may be a little less or would be more reluctant to add debt to the balance sheet long term, I guess I'd love to hear what the options are. I recognize doing it now provides the funds that get you out to 2028. I appreciate that, but it would also be nice to know if there's some opportunity to structure it in a way that we could find a way to prepay or pay down, if it's in tranches, however that might work, that it provides an opportunity for us to, because we're going to have the debt service, so that just adds to our operating
it does.
Budget. So anyway, I just like to see what other options are out there to achieve that flexibility.
So when you look at this table, Mayor Weiss, thank you for that question. There are 3 series of debt that remain outstanding that make up that roughly $14 million number. We have balances on the 2015 issuance. We have balances on the 2016 issuance and the 2019, which was the last time we went out to the debt market. Those 3 debt service I wouldn't want to pay off because they're scheduled to roll off by the end of 2030 anyway. So when we had defeased debt back in 2021, we had projected that debt service, which was that was going to, we shaved off about 9 years of debt service by making that move at that time. I don't remember the exact savings. I think it was 126 or so million that we had projected the debt service for the 9-year period that resulted as a savings. So this 15, 16, and 19 series will be paid off. The way our bonds have been structured historically, and that may be something that we need to discuss with the financial advisors and the bond counsel, the way we've structured is that to make our investment, our tax-exempt bonds, more attractive to the investing public, we provide some guarantees that we're not going to call them for X number of years, whatever that X may be, right? I think that has been 10 years. Someone's holding up fingers in the back. We are in the resolution, in the draft resolution that we've already provided and we're working through with Carolyn and the bond counsel, et cetera, we're giving ourselves the flexibility of addressing that, of prepayment of debt, based on what the situation is whenever we come to that point. So as of right now, nothing on the 15, 16, and 19. Those would roll off at the end of 2030. The new debt is projected to be a 20-year bond, and we will look at defeasing or prepaying or refunding as time goes on. But that would be the plan. Essentially, that's what we were doing over here, to eliminate debt by a certain time. But having to balance the needs of both the capital and the operating needs of the authority, this is the strategic idea that we think makes the most sense.
Raj, I had one question, and on these financial forecasts, I think the authority's done a good job of investing in preventive maintenance. Mm-hmm. Is there any change in those budgeted amounts than what we've been doing
for the last 5 years, or historically?
Yeah,
in the
right. In terms, will this under these projections? Will the level of preventive maintenance that we need to run our organization, will it continue at whatever?
The 1 to 5 million number? I think
whatever is appropriate. I don't know if that's a you or a Mike question on that.
I don't have that number at the top. I believe that for 2028, we have a higher amount of PM drawdowns. But for 26 and 27, they have been in the same range. But we can confirm that. I don't have that.
I want to know just whatever the authority has thought the investment should be to keep things running and not falling behind. You've done a good job to stay in front of that. And the other thing, we didn't talk about this with Kea, but I was thinking about it over the weekend, is in our reduction in the rail cars, because we do a lot of grant work in Bay Village. Are there grant dollars that we had gone after on the 60 rail cars or outside funding that if we scale back to 54, we won't receive? And if that's the case, have those reductions been reflected in the financials? It might not be an impact at all, but I want to know, and I don't, that's a you or a shipper or Doc, on that.
And Carolyn, we'll need to get our heads together and come back. I believe that not to be the case, but right. we'll confirm that and bring that back to you.
But I do think those when you make, again, going back to those assumptions, saying that, we go out and we apply for a grant on something, we cut it in half, we're only going to be able to get reimbursement for half. So I want to make sure any outside funding, any commitments we had from former Senator Brown, anything there, that a lot of times those are delayed because you've got to make the purchase before you can get a reimbursement. I want to ensure that that reduction doesn't affect, to Mayor Weiss's question, a future revenue stream. That if that's the right answer, then that you and Kay and everybody have reflected that reduction in the financial statements.
Yeah, we'll definitely consider
and related cash flow, because I think all those go together.
Excellent question and comment. Do appreciate that. We will provide more information on that at a later time. But historically, our strategic idea always when we deal with grants on a larger project is to use competitive grants first, et cetera, so that we are making sure that every dollar of the grant funds are used first before we tap into other sources that could be local or other sources.
Right, but just the grants we've gotten is that reduction. If we don't buy it, then we can't get the reimbursement. So that's if you might have some of those. That would just be a question to make sure that's there.
You want to clarify?
Mike?
Come on over.
Good morning, President Kumar, members of the committee, members of the board. I'm Fonseca, the Chief Operating Officer. President Kumar, I think you asked a question, and I want to maybe make a clarification and see if I understood your question correctly. This was the question related to reductions in PM and how it would affect our preventative maintenance. If you were asking that question to ask if we would be doing less preventative maintenance activities because the granting, the preventative maintenance grants are there, the answer would be no. We conduct the preventative maintenance in our general fund as ongoing maintenance of our assets. We are able to then seek reimbursements from capital grants to do so, but the work has already occurred, and so the work would be a part of the normal operating budget and operations division work projects to do preventive maintenance. So we'll still maintain the trains, we'll still maintain the buses, the facilities. What happens is we're able to be reimbursed for whatever portion of that the finance department allocates to it. So the activity has occurred, we get reimbursement for it. And it's not dependent upon the reimbursement at the level of activity.
Thank you for that. I had not considered reimbursement of the preventive maintenance, but now I do recall we've talked about that in the past.
Yes.
I think my question was on the rail card side, was on the capital side, if we had gone after external funding to help us in that effort. With the reduction of those 6 rail cars, would that affect the reimbursement on the capital side?
Mike wanted to say something.
Mike? You have, good.
Mayor Kumar, members of the board, that reduction would not impact any of the grants that we have in hand. However, we still, in our funding stack, have 2 more years of Ohio grants in our grant strategy, and it could easily impact our ability to receive that funding in fiscal years 28 and 29. And that's in a $14 to $18 million in our funding stack. So but none of the grants we have went out to the high 50s in terms of cars. So, for instance, the $130 million was focused on the first 36 cars. And some of the other stuff was on the next 6 and the next 6, but it could impact our ability to get the last piece of grant funding in our funding stack.
And would that funding stack be for the first 54 cars, or would it be for the 6 that we're not getting?
The last 6. So in that funding stack, the remaining funding in the grant program, we've raised $420 million. And basically of the 30 million that's left, 15 of it was the rolling stock reserve fund, that was us, and about 15 was a stack of what's been a very good commitment to date of funding from ODOT. But if we're not going to order any more cars, that jeopardizes our ability to get a grant for more cars.
Let me offer just a quick, and Mike, feel free to talk to it as well, because I hear the question to be, I hear it 2 different ways, right? There is a perception and there is a sort of promise to, or a plan of what we originally set out to do, which was the 60. We're also in different financial situation, given a lot of different, additions to the situation, whether it's tariffs or whether it's internal financing and so on and so forth. So I think what we need to do is answer the question, not saying we have to do it today, but whether or not there are stipulations within the grant program, right, specifically in black and white, that say if you change from 60 to 54, then you will not be applicable for these funds. I don't know that that's the answer. I think that there is a perception that Mike is getting to, and this is why I'm saying, correct me if I'm wrong, which is valid as well, to say we committed to trying to get to 60. We have to roll that back due to financial capabilities. we want to make sure that there's no hurt feelings over not being able to get to the 60. If I'm saying in layman's terms, I think that folks understand it's not a secret that everyone is in financial hardship. We're trying to make sure we're making the best decision for future and current. If we cannot get to the 60 and we have to stop at 54, I think we have a pretty good plan to be able to address that locally with legislatures to let them know it's not in our best interest to move forward with the 60, to be bankrupt in order to make friends. We have to make sure that we make the best financial decision for the agency and then apply from that perspective. But we will check to make sure that we're not actually held back from funds because we've rolled back the number. We don't want to cut our nose to spite our face, but we also don't want to make decisions based on where we thought we were 5 years ago financially, move forward with the 60 in hopes that we'll get funding based on that number. We have to be able to massage it to make sure that those relationships are intact and folks understand why we're sticking with the 54. Hopefully that doesn't impact the grant availability, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you very much, India. And once again, I just want to make sure that we repeat that the decision to not exercise the last 6 options was not taken lightly. I mean, there were a significant number of internal discussions, my partner in operations, et cetera, because we wanted to make sure that the service needs were also being met. So I think that was a careful evaluation. But 36 million and roughly 6 million a car did also play a part in that discussion.
And that continues to be a legislative conversation and education to make sure that our partners understand. We try to make good on what our plans are, but plans and will do change over time. We just have to be able to bring them into the conversation so that we're not looking as if we're backtracking on something that we promised to provide. And I think that's the key to all of it. But 6 cars is 6 cars, and it does come with a price tag that's very impactful to where we are now. So we try our best to be able to uphold our original plan.
Just one more question on the rail car. Has there been any projection on sort of impact of the modeling from 60 to 54 in terms of actual service? And if that hasn't been done, would that be possible to be provided to the board for
I will look to my partner on the left.
If I could, when Trustee Love, when you say impact to service, I think we're both on the same page, but you're talking long-term, not just short-term, correct? Yes, thank you.
Joel,
I'm being asked to respond again. I'm Joel Freilich, Director of Service Management. What I can tell you is that the purpose of having a lot of cars is that sometimes, and really often, there's deterioration of cars over time. And occasionally a car becomes so unserviceable that it is discarded. And so a larger number provides you a larger margin. I can assure you that even 54 already provides a large margin to deal with these things. So the frequency of service in, let's say, the year 2028 will be precisely the same whether we buy 54 cars or 60 cars. It's the margin of spares that is affected by the 54 to 60. My colleague, Mr. Shipper, is eager to protect my successors in operations 25 years from now, and I really appreciate how hard he has worked to do just that. But in the first 10 years, I assure you, the service frequency will be precisely the same whether you bought 54 or 60 cars.
If I can add, it might be helpful. Joel, let me ask you and Fonse if you want to work on preparing just a quick update for the board and, of course, to the deputies as well, to be able to show the ridership projections and the capacity analysis, basically, for the rail, because I think I'm hearing that that's what a question is, and it makes sense. We want to make sure that we're providing enough service capacity for future generations, right? And so I think that's the question, and it's a good one. But we can't talk in theory. We need to be able to show hard numbers as to what's the average ridership of what we're dealing with now. We hope that when we have new cars, all of a sudden the ridership will, jump. So we don't want to base current numbers out 10 years. Of course, we want to be able to show that we're able to handle increased capacity. So if we could be able to provide that projection, if that gets to the question that I'm hearing, I think that would be helpful.
We will follow up on that.
Okay, thanks.
Can I offer one more just contextual piece of information? We have 58 cars now.
Yes, and on an average day, many fewer than that are out there on the line, and the additional ones are spares to support maintenance, and so that's where we're at right now. With extension, which we hope to do, of ideally all trains from Van Aken and Green Road, all extending to the airport, that does require more operating funds. And then if we further increase the frequency of those trains, that's yet more operating funds. So what kind of a levy, if any, we have, that will affect service frequency in 2028, 2029. But the number of cars will not affect service frequency in 2028 or 2029.
If I could go back to Mayor Weiss's question about the debt. I know you mentioned that current 13.9 in outstanding debt is going to retire by 2033?
2030.
2030? And the proximity to now is the reason to not retire it early? Or rather, I should say, I'm assuming there may be new revenue coming from somewhere. But in that case, it's because of how soon that is that we wouldn't retire it?
If we refinance that debt, you add another 20 years to that. So that's primarily the reason, right? I mean, if you want to refinance, essentially you would be refinancing and going out for something larger than the 35 million. These are scheduled to rotate off in about 3 or 4 years anyway. So that was the approach that we took, that let it retire natural course. We have it planned. Next year's debt service on the current outstanding debt is about 7.5 million, and Kay and John, you can correct me, it drops down to 2 million. So the amount of savings that we would generate would not be as significant as just letting them retire naturally.
That 7.5 number drops off this year.
For 2026, the debt service is about 7.5, 7.6 million.
Sorry, the service number or the
we have numbers.
Carolyn,
retirement
Grants
number?
Manager, Director of Grants Management and Treasury. The current debt service that is due for 2026 is 7.6 million, and it drops to 3.1 million in 2027, and by 2030, 1.5 million.
I'm presuming then that's because there's a large principal chunk payment.
Yes.
That is correct.
Thanks.
So as I said, Mr. Sleesman, that the amount of savings wasn't worth the effort.
Right. Which, if there's a large chunk of principal retiring this year, I would agree. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, great. As I said, I want to circle around with everyone. I'll share my notes with you and then maybe this will pique some questions for you that we can get together. And we would like to hold a board governance meeting just so we can collect everything, make sure we're getting, I think it was a very complete presentation, but just make sure we get everybody's questions answered on that information. Also, a note, the information on the route cuts, I know Bob sent that out to your RTA emails on March 25th, so you could just go back and check that. You should have it. If you don't have it for some reason, let us know, but otherwise it should be in your inbox. Thanks so much, Raj.
All right, my pleasure, sir. Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second, Pichetti.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
I'll call to order this meeting of the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sleesman?
Here.
Ms. Pachetti?
Here.
Mayor Gallo?
Here.
Mr. Love?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thanks, Brent. We have a couple items today. The first is the approval of the minutes from March 3rd, 2026. I believe you have those in front of you. Are there any revisions, discussion items, or edits? And if not, I'll move to approve those. Can I have a second?
Second, Gallo.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes stand approved. We have one presentation this morning. Hayden Garage Lift Replacement Phase 3 for mobile wireless column lifts. A competitive procurement to replace 2 parallelogram lifts with 2 sets of 6 battery-operated wireless column lifts, with an additional set included to be used as a spare. We'll get the presentation from Norbert Reynolds and Lou Catalucci. Floor is yours, gentlemen.
Sure. Thanks. Okay. Mayor Kumar, Committee Chair Sleesman, members of the board, RTA staff, and others, good morning. My name is Norbert Reynolds, resident engineer. I'm here this morning to present to you the Hayden Garage Lift Replacement, Phase 3, which is for the mobile wireless column lifts. The scope of work, it includes removal and disposal of 2 in-ground existing Advantage parallelogram lifts. It includes filling in existing pits with concrete. It includes providing 22 new battery-powered wireless column lifts that can be coupled in sets of 4 or 6. It also includes electrical wiring for 120-volt and to install multiple overhead retractable outlets, which will be used for charging the new lifts. It also involves providing 16 jack stands, each with a capacity for 20 tons. It also includes application of a special floor coating. The new lifts are to be fully tested and certified before they are placed into service. The contractor is required to provide training to the RTA staff on how to maintain and operate these lifts. And during the construction process, the work will be coordinated between the facility managers and the facility and our engineer. So currently at the Hayden Garage, we have mobile column lifts, which are made by Mohawk. Now, if you look at this photo here, in the middle of the picture, you see 3 mobile column lifts. And these lifts are connected by a cable for synchronization. On the left is one of our 60-foot articulated bus, which is being supported by a parallelogram lift. Now, this is one of the lift that will be taken out, filled in, and then we'll be using the new mobile column lift in that space and similar spaces throughout the garage. Now, like I said earlier, the lifts can be coupled in sets of 4 or 6. And on your left is an example of how you can have 4 lifts that are, in sync. These lifts, I said, are battery operated wireless. So because there's no wiring as we currently have, it provides better access for the workers. And it's also safer because there's no pit. On the right is an example of the jack stands that will be provided. Now, these jack stands are for 2 purposes. One, it's for safety, Usually, once the lifts are the vehicle is lifted and put into its corrected height, these stands will be placed under the vehicle for safety while the workers are working. Also, these once the vehicle is supported by these jack stands, the mobile columns can be taken out and can be used elsewhere for another vehicle. So it gives better flexibility to the garage to have these type of lifts. Now, why are we going with wireless mobile column lifts? Let's look at some of the advantages. One, it improves safety and layout. So like we said, it eliminates, interconnecting cables, which which creates a tripping hazards. And it also creates a cleaner work and work environment, which is safer. Optimal mobility and flexibility. Wireless lift can be positioned, like I said, anywhere in the workshop or even outdoor if needed, enabling an average of 5 to 10 minutes of setup compared to the wired lift, which takes up to 30 minutes to 60 minutes for setting up. It's a simplified operation and setup. No need to manage long cables, between columns. Also, these lifts has very high efficiency and syncing. So, these modern wireless lift systems offer secure encrypted communication to synchronize up to even 8 columns simultaneously, safely. Mohawk, like I said, the garage currently has Mohawk lifts, so this brings familiarity to the staff. The advantages include high load capacity. Each lift can lift a total of up to 18,000 pounds. The quality of construction, they are built with 3/4 inch steel forklift mass rather than bent sheet metal, right? So that provides longevity and durability. They are portable and adjustable, and safety control. These lift features the ALI, which is the Automotive Lift Institute, and the ETL certification. They have mechanical locks at multiple heights and are fully synchronized columns that adjust for speeds to keep the load level at all times. And if there should be a blowout, it has what they call a velocity fuse, which prevents uncontrolled descent of the vehicle. They are battery powered, and this will provide up to 30 cycles per charge for the lift. And it also comes with a 5-year structural warranty and a lifelong cylinder warranty. I'll just hand over to Lou.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lou Catalusi. I am the contract administrator for this project. I'll be presenting the procurement overview. This invitation for bid was issued February 9th, 2026. It was accessed on our website by 22 interested parties, which is contractors, subcontractors, and others. And 2 firms submitted a bid. Our lowest responsive and responsible bidder is Standard Contracting and Engineering, Inc. Their experience, Standard Contracting and Engineering, Inc. has successfully completed projects for Nestle, Ford, General Motors, Lubrizol, and GCRTA, among others. I also want to mention that Standard Contracting and Engineering successfully completed phase 1 of our Hayden Garage Lift Replacement project. Recommendation, staff requests that the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee recommend award to Standard Contracting and Engineering, Inc. for the Hayden Garage Lift Replacement Phase 3 Mobile Wireless Column Lifts project. The contract is an amount not to exceed $799,689.00. We would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. It's good to hear that they've already done 1 phase of this project anyway. Do I have any questions from the committee or the board? All right. Hearing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion, Love.
Second, Gallo.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. This will head to the full board for approval. Thank you very much. That is our last item for this committee, so I will move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second, Gallo.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting stands adjourned. The committee meeting stands adjourned, and we'll move on. Here you go, Mayor.
I'll call to order the Compensation Committee. Please call the roll.
Mayor Weiss,
Here.
Ms. Pichetti,
Here.
Ms. Elder,
Here.
Mayor Gallo,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Great. I'll make a motion to go into executive session to consider the employment, evaluation, and compensation of a public employee or official. Is there a second?
Second, Elder.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Pichetti,
Yes.
Ms. Elder,
Yes.
Mayor Gallo,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. We will then go into executive session, and for those that may be listening, we do not intend to take any action upon the completion of the committee meeting in executive session today. With that, I think we're actually down here in the breakout or conference room here. India, if you're available, maybe for a few minutes, that would be great. But otherwise, and George, of course. But otherwise, we'll go into the conference room. Okay. Yes, all the board members, if you'd like to attend, are always welcome. All right, thank you.
These little.
Mayor Weiss. Ms. Bichetti.
Yes.
Mrs. Elder. Mayor Gallo. Motion carries.